Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Curtis Cohen understood compromise. 8 years of marriage to Laurel had taught him that much. He'd learned to ignore her mother Catherine's barbed comments at Sunday dinners, to pretend he didn't notice how his wife's face hardened whenever he suggested they spend Christmas with his side of the family instead. He'd accepted that his modest upbringing, a single mom, a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, scholarships that put him through state college, would always be a mark against him in Catherine Kane's eyes. But he'd never compromised on his son. 6-year-old Ethan was the only pure thing in Curtis's life. The boy had his father's dark eyes and curious mind, always asking questions about how things worked, why the sky changed colors, where stars went during the day. Curtis saw himself in that wonder, remembered being that age before his own father died, before the world got complicated and cruel. The photography studio Curtis owned in Brooklyn had been struggling lately, but he told himself it was temporary. Commercial work paid the bills, corporate headshots, product shoots for startups, the occasional wedding. The artistic projects he actually cared about lived in a portfolio he rarely opened anymore. Laurel called it a hobby business, and Catherine never missed an opportunity to remind him that her daughter could have married Tyler Ashford, whose family owned half the real estate in Connecticut. Curtis had met Laurel at a gallery opening 7 years ago. She'd been 24, beautiful in that polished way wealthy women cultivated, laughing with friends in front of his photographs. He'd been exhibiting his work then, still believed he might make it as an artist. She'd approached him, seemed genuinely interested in his vision, his technique. They'd married within a year. He should have noticed the changes sooner. How Laurel grew colder after the wedding. How her mother's visits became more frequent, more invasive. Catherine had never approved of the marriage, had made it clear she considered Curtis a gold digger, though Laurel's trust fund remained locked tight under her mother's control. The prenup Catherine insisted on made that explicitly clear. In a divorce, Curtis would leave with nothing. Not the house they lived in, purchased with Catherine's money. Not custody of Ethan, whom Catherine's lawyers had made sure would stay with the more stable parent. Nothing. It was Tuesday, February 14th, when Curtis's world fractured. He'd been at the studio late, working on a shoot for a new restaurant in Williamsburg. The chef wanted moody, dramatic shots of his dishes, and Curtis had spent hours getting the lighting right. His phone buzzed around 8 p.m. A text from Audrey O'Connor, the neighbor who lived 2 doors down. "Curtis, I don't know what's happening, but you need to see this." The video loaded slowly. Curtis's hand shook as the image resolved. Ethan, his son, standing on the front porch in his Spider-Man underwear. No shoes. No jacket. The timestamp showed it was 8:02 p.m. The weather app on Curtis's phone read -12 degrees Fahrenheit. Ethan was banging on the door with small fists that had to be numb by now. Curtis could see his son's breath, could see him crying, could see the way his small body shook. How long had he been out there? Movement in the video. The curtain in the living room window pulled back. Catherine Kane's face appeared, her expression twisted in something that looked like satisfaction. She was laughing, actually laughing. And beside her, watching with arms crossed, was Laurel. Curtis's vision went white at the edges. His hands moved on autopilot, dialing 911. "My son is locked outside in sub-zero temperatures at 347 Maple Drive, Ridgewood. He's 6 years old. No coat, no shoes. Send someone now." He gave them the details mechanically, already moving toward his car. The studio was 20 minutes from home. Too long. Ethan could die in 20 minutes. Curtis scrolled through his contacts as he ran, found a name he hadn't called in 3 years. Hector Duke. They'd grown up in the same Queens neighborhood, taken different paths after high school. Curtis had chosen college and cameras. Hector had chosen other things. "Curtis, it's been a minute." "Hector, I need you at 347 Maple Drive, Ridgewood. Right now? My son's in danger." "What kind of danger?" Curtis's voice cracked. "The kind that needs someone who doesn't give a fuck about laws." Silence. Then, "I'm 15 minutes out. Who am I dealing with?" "My wife. My mother-in-law. They locked my 6-year-old outside. It's 12 below zero, Hector. Say no more. I'll handle it." Curtis drove like he was trying to kill someone. Himself, maybe, or the universe that had put his son in danger while he'd been adjusting aperture settings for artisanal pasta. He ran 2 red lights, took a corner so hard his tires screamed. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Cohen?" This is Detective Raymond Cooley, Ridgewood Police. We got a call about your son. Is he okay? Is Ethan okay? He's safe. Paramedics are checking him out. But Mr. Cohen, who the hell did you send to your house? Curtis's heart hammered. What do you mean? We arrived to find your mother-in-law and wife zip-tied to your living room couch. Some guy, wouldn't give his name, disappeared before we could question him, apparently broke in, restrained them, and had your son wrapped in blankets with the heat cranked to 80. Left a note that said, "You're welcome," and was gone. Your neighbors saw a black motorcycle leaving the scene. Curtis pulled into his street. Police cars, an ambulance, neighbors clustered on lawns despite the cold. He abandoned his car in the middle of the road and ran. Ethan sat in the back of the ambulance, wrapped in thermal blankets, crying. When he saw Curtis, he reached out with both arms. "Daddy!" Curtis grabbed his son, held him tight enough that Ethan squeaked in protest. "I've got you. I've got you. You're safe now." The paramedic, a woman named Josefina Mueller according to her name tag, touched Curtis's shoulder. "He's okay. Early stages of hypothermia, but we got him warm fast enough. He'll be fine. Another 10 minutes though." She didn't finish the sentence. "How long was he outside?" Based on his core temperature and the neighbor's video timestamp, approximately 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Curtis looked at his house, saw Laurel and Catherine through the window, a female officer cutting the zip ties from their wrists. Catherine was screaming about something. Laurel's face was pale. "Mr. Cohen?" Detective Cooley approached, a stocky man in his 50s with steel-gray hair. "We need to ask some questions about what happened here." Curtis met his eyes. "My wife and her mother locked my son outside in his underwear when it's 12 below zero. I called 911. That's all I know. And the man who restrained your family members? I don't know what you're talking about." Cooley studied him, then glanced back at the house. "Your wife claims your son had been misbehaving. Says she sent him outside for just a minute to teach him a lesson, and he must have locked himself out." Curtis felt something cold settle in his chest, colder than the February wind. "My neighbor has a video showing my mother-in-law watching him from the window, laughing. We've secured that video. We'll be investigating this as potential child endangerment." Cooley paused. "But Mr. Cohen, whoever your friend is, he committed breaking and entering assault. He saved my son's life." "That may be, but if we find him..." "Good luck with that," Curtis said quietly. The detective sighed. "Take your son to the ER. Get him checked out properly. We'll be in touch." Curtis carried Ethan to his car. As he buckled his son into the back seat, Laurel emerged from the house, Catherine right behind her. "Curtis, this is ridiculous." He was barely outside for a few minutes. Curtis turned. Whatever Laurel saw in his face made her stop mid-sentence. "Don't," he said. "Don't say another fucking word." Catherine stepped forward, all righteous indignation. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way? And sending some thug to assault us in our own home." "Your home," Curtis corrected. "Never mind, right, Catherine? You made sure of that. We could have you arrested." Curtis looked at this woman, this monster who'd laughed while his son froze, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. 8 years of swallowing her contempt, her cruelty, her casual destruction of everything he tried to build. 8 years of watching Laurel choose her mother over him, over their son. 8 years of compromise. No more. "Go ahead," Curtis said. "Call the police." "Oh wait, they're already here. And they have Audrey's video showing you laughing while my son begged to come inside." Catherine's face went rigid. Laurel grabbed her mother's arm. "Curtis, please, let's talk about this inside. I'm taking my son to the hospital. When I come back, both of you need to be gone. This is MY house." Catherine shrieked. "Then you can explain to the police why you were in your house watching a child freeze to death." Curtis opened his car door. 18 minutes, Laurel. He was out there for 18 minutes. The paramedic said 10 more, and he might not have made it. He saw it then, a flicker of something that might have been guilt on Laurel's face. But Catherine was already talking, already spinning it. "He's being dramatic. The boy was fine. This is all an overreaction." Curtis got in his car and drove away. At the ER, while doctors examined Ethan, Curtis sat in the waiting room and made a list. Not on paper. He wasn't stupid enough to leave evidence. In his mind, he cataloged everything he knew about Catherine Kane and her daughter. Catherine controlled Laurel's trust fund, worth approximately $8 million. She controlled the house, the cars, everything. She sat on the boards of 3 charities, loved being seen as a philanthropist, thrived on her reputation as a society matriarch. Her husband, Laurel's father, had died 10 years ago, leaving everything to Catherine with the stipulation that Laurel received her inheritance at age 35, 3 years from now. Unless Catherine deemed Laurel unfit, then the money stayed under Catherine's control indefinitely. Curtis had always wondered why Laurel let her mother dominate every aspect of their lives. Now he understood. Catherine held the purse strings, and Laurel was terrified of being cut off. His phone buzzed. "Hector, heard the little man's okay." "Good." Curtis typed back. "Thank you. We square now. Don't call me again unless you're ready to finish what we started." Curtis stared at that message for a long time. What did finishing look like? A doctor emerged, pulling Curtis from his thoughts. "Mr. Cohen? Ethan's going to be fine. No permanent damage. We're keeping him overnight for observation, but his prognosis is excellent." Relief crashed over Curtis like a wave. "Can I see him?" "Of course." Ethan was propped up in a hospital bed, looking small and fragile in a room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. He was watching cartoons on the mounted TV, but his eyes were red-rimmed. "Hey, buddy." Curtis sat on the edge of the bed. "Daddy, I was so cold." "I know. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I tried to be good. Grandma said I was being bad, that I needed to think about what I did. But I didn't do anything. I just asked if I could have more dessert." Curtis felt his jaw clench. "What happened then?" "Grandma got really mad. She said I was spoiled, that Mom spoiled me, that I needed to learn respect. She told Mom to put me outside. Mom said." Ethan's voice got very small. "Mom said okay. Did Mom look upset? Did she try to argue?" Ethan shook his head. "She just looked tired. Grandma does all the talking." Curtis smoothed his son's hair. "You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan. You understand that? Nothing that happened tonight was your fault. Is Grandma still mad at me?" "Grandma is never coming near you again. I promise you that." Curtis meant it. He didn't know how yet, but he meant every word. He stayed with Ethan until the boy fell asleep, then stepped into the hallway to think. His phone buzzed again. Another video from Audrey. "Curtis, I have more footage. My security camera caught the whole thing. Timestamp starts at 7:44 p.m. I think you need to see this." Curtis watched the video 3 times. 7:44 p.m. Catherine and Laurel in the living room, arguing about something. Catherine pointing at the ceiling, at Ethan's room probably. 7:46 p.m. Laurel going upstairs. 7:48 p.m. Laurel bringing Ethan downstairs, the boy in his pajamas. 7:49 p.m. Catherine talking to Ethan, her face angry. Ethan starting to cry. 7:50 p.m. Laurel stripping Ethan down to his underwear while Catherine watched. 7:51 p.m. Catherine opening the front door. Ethan backing away, shaking his head. 7:52 p.m. Catherine grabbing Ethan by the arm, dragging him to the door. 7:53 p.m. Ethan being pushed outside. The door closing. The lock turning. 7:54 p.m. to 8:11 p.m. Ethan banging on the door, crying, trying the handle. His movements getting slower, less coordinated. Catherine periodically checking the window, smiling. Laurel pacing, looking at her phone, looking at the door, but never opening it. 8:11 p.m. A black motorcycle pulling up. Hector Duke, though his face was covered, approaching the porch. Checking Ethan, wrapping him in what looked like a thermal blanket from his bike, then kicking the front door open with one boot. 8:13 p.m. Hector emerging, putting Ethan on his motorcycle, revving the engine near the house, probably to warm up the bike's heat. Then carrying Ethan back inside. 8:15 p.m. Hector exiting, pulling the door closed, gone before the first police car arrived at 8:17 p.m. 18 minutes of deliberate cruelty, all caught on camera. Curtis forwarded the video to his own phone, then to Detective Cooley. "This is from my neighbor's security system. Full timeline of tonight's events." The response came within 5 minutes. "Jesus Christ. We'll be arresting your wife and mother-in-law in the morning. Child endangerment, reckless endangerment. We'll need you to come in and give a statement." Curtis leaned against the hospital wall and thought about laws, about justice, about the difference between the two. Laurel and Catherine would be arrested. They might even be charged. But Catherine had money, would hire the best lawyers. They'd argue it was a momentary lapse in judgment, that they brought Ethan inside before any real harm occurred, that they were family and families make mistakes. The charges might stick, might not. Even if convicted, they'd probably get probation, community service, a slap on the wrist. And then what? They'd be out there, angry, vengeful. Catherine would use her money and connections to make Curtis's life hell. She'd fight him for custody of Ethan, drag him through court for years. The prenup meant Curtis would lose everything in a divorce: the house, any financial security, maybe even significant custody time with his son. The system wasn't designed for justice. It was designed for people like Catherine to win. Curtis thought about Hector's text. "Don't call me again unless you're ready to finish what we started." He thought about his son, 18 minutes from death, while his own mother watched. He thought about 8 years of Catherine's cruelty, of being treated like he wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't even fully human in her eyes. And Curtis Cohen, who'd always believed in doing things the right way, who'd compromised and swallowed his pride and played by the rules, felt that part of himself die. He made a decision. The system could have its turn. Let the police arrest them. Let the lawyers posture. Let the wheels of justice turn slowly and accomplish nothing. But after that, Curtis would have his. He pulled up his contacts, scrolled to a name he'd saved 3 years ago and never called. Lance Conrad, a private investigator who'd worked a case for Curtis's lawyer during a contract dispute. Lance had found things, dirt on people, information that wasn't exactly obtained through legal channels. The phone rang twice. Conrad Investigations. "Mr. Conrad, my name is Curtis Cohen. I need you to find out everything, and I mean everything, about 2 people. Catherine Kane and Laurel Cohen. I want to know what they've done, who they've hurt, where their money comes from, every secret they've ever buried. I don't care what it costs." "What's this for, Mr. Cohen?" Curtis looked through the window at his son, sleeping peacefully for the first time that night. "Preparation," he said. "I'm preparing for war." The next morning, Catherine Kane and Laurel Cohen were arrested at 6 a.m. Curtis watched from his car as police officers led them both out in handcuffs. Catherine screaming about lawyers and rights, and how dare they, Laurel silent and pale. Audrey O'Connor stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching with grim satisfaction. She caught Curtis's eye and nodded once. They'd talked after Curtis returned from the hospital, Audrey explaining how she'd been taking out her recycling when she heard Ethan crying, how she'd seen him on the porch and immediately started recording. "I called you first," she'd said, "because I know how the system works. Police would take their time, and that boy didn't have time. I hoped you'd know someone who could act fast." Curtis had thanked her, promised to make sure her involvement was minimized. Audrey was divorced, lived alone with 2 cats, worked as a nurse at Mercy General. She'd seen enough neglect and abuse in her years in the ER to know predators when she saw them. "People like your mother-in-law," Audrey had said, "they're used to getting away with everything because they have money and connections. They think rules don't apply to them. Sometimes someone needs to show them differently." Now, watching Catherine being pushed into a police car, still shouting, Curtis felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just cold calculation. Detective Cooley approached his car. Curtis rolled down the window. "They're being charged with reckless endangerment of a child and criminal endangerment. The DA might add more after reviewing the evidence. You did the right thing, pressing charges. When can I get my son's things from the house? We'll need to process it as a crime scene first. Give us 24 hours. Cooley paused. "Mr. Cohen, I've been doing this job 26 years. I've seen a lot of abuse cases, a lot of parents who hurt their kids. But I've never seen someone look at a freezing child the way your mother-in-law did in that video. Like it was funny." "She's a monster," Curtis said simply. "Yeah, she is." Cooley tapped the car roof. "We'll be in touch." Curtis drove to the hospital, picked up Ethan, who'd been cleared for discharge, and took him to a hotel. The Ridgewood Inn wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm and far away from 347 Maple Drive. Ethan was quiet, clinging to Curtis's hand as they walked to their room. Curtis had stopped at Target on the way, bought his son new clothes, toys, anything to make this feel less like the trauma it was. "Daddy, are we going home?" "Not to that home, buddy. We're going to find a new place. Just you and me." "What about Mom?" Curtis sat on the hotel bed, pulled Ethan into his lap. "Mom made some bad choices. She hurt you, and that's not okay. She's going to have to answer for that. I don't want to see Grandma ever again." "You won't. I promise." Curtis kept his promises. Over the next week, Curtis moved through the world like a ghost. He hired a divorce lawyer, Ken Hurd, known for being ruthless and expensive. The prenup was ironclad, but Ken assured him they could fight for full custody based on the endangerment charges. With that video, no judge in their right mind is giving your wife custody, Ken said. Catherine Kane is toxic as hell, and your wife enabled her. We can make this work. Curtis also kept his appointment with Lance Conrad. The private investigator's office was in a nondescript building in Lower Manhattan, 3 flights up, no elevator. Lance himself was in his 50s, balding, with the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much of humanity's ugly side. I looked into your situation, Lance said, gesturing for Curtis to sit. Your wife and mother-in-law made the news. Child endangerment case. That's why I need your help. You want dirt on them. I want everything. Lance opened a folder. I did some preliminary digging. Catherine Kane, née Catherine Ashford. Old money, Connecticut family. Married Douglas Kane 35 years ago. He died of a heart attack 10 years back. Left everything to her. She sits on boards, does charity work, very visible in society circles. What about things that aren't visible? Lance smiled, thin and knowing. Now we're talking. Catherine's first husband wasn't Douglas Kane. She was married at 19 to a man named Glenn Quinn. Marriage lasted 2 years, ended when Quinn disappeared. Never found. Declared legally dead after 7 years. Catherine inherited his family's money. They owned a textile business. Curtis leaned forward. Disappeared how? Boating accident, supposedly. They were out on Long Island Sound. Storm rolled in. Quinn went overboard. Catherine was the only witness. Coast Guard found the boat. Never found Quinn's body. You think she killed him? I think it's convenient. But that was 33 years ago. Hard to prove anything now. Lance flipped a page. After Quinn, Catherine laid low for a few years, then married Douglas Kane. He was older, wealthy, already had heart problems. Catherine was his nurse. Jesus. Gets better. Douglas changed his will 3 times in the 10 years they were married. Each time, Catherine got more, his kids from his first marriage got less. By the time he died, Catherine inherited everything. His children contested the will, claimed undue influence, but Catherine's lawyers crushed them. Curtis felt something dark and cold forming in his chest. What else? Laurel, your wife. Only child, spoiled rotten, 3 arrests as a teenager. All sealed juvenile records. All paid to go away. DUI at 16, assault at 17. Beat another girl so badly the girl needed reconstructive surgery, and possession with intent to distribute at 18. Catherine made all of it disappear. Assault. The victim was Tyler Ashford's younger sister, Melissa. Tyler was Laurel's boyfriend at the time. Melissa claimed Laurel attacked her out of jealousy, thought Melissa was flirting with Tyler. Catherine paid the Ashford family $2 million to keep it quiet and dropped the charges. Curtis remembered Catherine's comments about Tyler Ashford, how Laurel could have married him. What happened to Tyler and Laurel? Tyler broke up with her after the assault. His family wanted nothing to do with the Kanes after that. Tyler married someone else, moved to California. I heard Catherine never forgave him for abandoning Laurel. Curtis rubbed his face. He'd married into a family of monsters and never knew it. There's more, Lance said. Catherine's charities, 3 of them. The Kane Foundation for Children's Welfare, the Ashford Kane Arts Initiative, and the Douglas Kane Memorial Scholarship Fund. I had an accountant friend look at their public filings. The foundations take in about $5 million a year in donations. Maybe 10% actually goes to charitable work. The rest? Administrative costs, salaries, events. Catherine pays herself $400,000 a year as director of the children's charity. That's legal, unfortunately. As long as some money goes to the actual cause, nonprofits can pay administrators whatever they want. It's a scam, but it's an allowed scam. Catherine uses the foundations to maintain her social status, gets tax write-offs, and pays herself a fortune for doing basically nothing. Curtis thought about Catherine laughing while Ethan froze, about Laurel standing there watching. He thought about the prenup designed to trap him, about 8 years of being treated as less than human. Can any of this be used against them legally? The foundation stuff, maybe. I'd need to dig deeper, but if there's actual fraud, like if she's funneling money to shell companies or claiming fake expenses, we could report it to the IRS. That's a federal crime. Lance paused. But Mr. Cohen, you didn't hire me just for legal dirt, did you? No. Then let me be clear. I find information. What you do with it is your business. I don't ask questions, I don't testify, And if this goes sideways, you never heard my name. Understood. Good. Lance pulled out another folder. I'll keep digging. Give me 2 weeks. I'll have everything. Financials, associates, enemies, secrets. Whatever you're planning, you'll have ammunition. Curtis left the office with the first folder, the one containing Catherine's history. He read it 3 times on the train back to Brooklyn. Glenn Quinn, Catherine's first husband. Disappeared 33 years ago. Never found. Curtis thought about justice, about evidence, about the difference between what the law could prove and what was true. He thought about calling Hector again. But not yet. First, he needed to know everything. Then he could decide how to use it. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Catherine had been released on bail within hours. Her lawyer, some shark named Rodolfo Downs, had argued she was a pillar of the community with no flight risk. Laurel was released too, on Catherine's dime. Curtis had a restraining order keeping both women away from Ethan. Ken Hurd had filed emergency custody papers, and the judge, thank God, had sided with Curtis pending a full hearing. The video is damning, Ken explained. But Catherine's lawyer is going to argue it was a one-time lapse in judgment, that Catherine has been a devoted grandmother, that separating Ethan from his mother is traumatic. They'll paint you as vindictive, using your son as a weapon in a divorce. I'm protecting my son from people who tried to kill him. I know that. You know that. We need to make the judge know that. Ken leaned back in his chair. How's your background? Anything they can use against you? Curtis thought about Hector, about the breaking and entering, about hiring Lance Conrad to dig up dirt. I'm clean. Good. Keep it that way. No contact with your wife or mother-in-law, no matter what. They'll try to provoke you, get you to do something stupid. Don't give them ammunition. Curtis kept his word. He avoided them. But he didn't stop preparing. Lance Conrad delivered his full report 2 weeks later. Curtis read it in a coffee shop in Manhattan, Ethan at school, the world moving around him while he absorbed the depths of Catherine Kane's evil. The report was 147 pages. Glenn Quinn's disappearance wasn't the only suspicious death in Catherine's orbit. Douglas Kane's first wife had died in a car accident 5 years before Douglas met Catherine. The accident was ruled a result of brake failure, but Douglas's children had always suspected sabotage. The wife had been driving Douglas's car, which he just had serviced. Douglas himself had survived 2 accidents before his fatal heart attack, a fall down the stairs that broke his hip, and food poisoning that put him in the hospital for a week. Catherine had been there for all of it. Lance had also found evidence of financial fraud. The Kane Foundation for Children's Welfare was paying 6-figure consulting fees to shell companies owned by Catherine's friends. One company, managed by Catherine's former college roommate Sandra Gutierrez, had received $800,000 over 2 years for event planning services. Lance couldn't find evidence of any actual events. Another shell company, owned by a man named Willard Jones, Catherine's former financial advisor, had been paid $1.2 million for operational consulting. Willard Jones had died 3 years ago. The payments continued. Someone's committing fraud using a dead man's company, Lance had written in the report. Either Catherine doesn't know he's dead, which seems unlikely, or she's knowingly paying herself through his shell company. That's embezzlement from a nonprofit. Federal crime, 5 to 10 years if convicted. Curtis had what he needed for the legal approach. He could report Catherine to the IRS, to the state attorney general, to the nonprofit oversight board. She could be investigated, charged, possibly convicted. But Curtis had read enough. He understood that Catherine Kane had probably killed at least 2 people, maybe 3. She'd abused and stolen from charities meant to help children while laughing at his own son freezing to death. The law was too slow, too uncertain, too easy to manipulate with money and lawyers. Curtis needed something else. He called Hector Duke. They met in Prospect Park at midnight, both men standing by the lake while the city slept. You ready to finish this? Hector asked. I need to know what you can do. Depends on what you want done. Curtis pulled out his phone, showed Hector the report. These women are monsters. They've killed people, stolen from charities, tortured my son. The law might touch them, might not. I need guarantees. Hector read through the summary, whistled low. Your mother-in-law is a real piece of work. Can you make them disappear? I can. But that's not what you want. Curtis looked at him. What do you mean? You want them to hurt. You want them to suffer like they made your boy suffer. You want justice that feels like justice. Hector handed back the phone. Disappearing's too easy. They need to fall, publicly, spectacularly. They need to lose everything and know they lost it. Can you do that? Not alone. But I know people. People who can manipulate records, plant evidence, create trails that lead exactly where we want them to go. You've got the motive. This report shows fraud, maybe murder. We just need to make sure the right people find it, in the right way, at the right time. That's not enough, Curtis said. I want them to feel what Ethan felt. I want them to be scared, powerless, begging. Then I want them destroyed. Hector smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Now you're talking. Here's what we do. Curtis listened as Hector laid out a plan that was illegal, dangerous, and absolutely perfect. It would take 3 weeks to set up. 3 weeks to gather materials, coordinate with Hector's people, position all the pieces on the board. 3 weeks until the custody hearing, where Curtis would face Catherine and Laurel in court. 3 weeks until Curtis Cohen stopped being the man who compromised and became the man who burned it all down. One question, Hector said. You sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back. These aren't pranks or scare tactics. What we're planning is criminal. If it goes wrong, you could lose your son, your freedom, everything. Curtis thought about Ethan's small fists banging on that door. He thought about Catherine's laugh. He thought about Laurel watching, doing nothing. I'm sure. Then let's give these monsters what they deserve. The two men shook hands, and Curtis Cohen crossed a line he'd never thought he'd cross. He felt no regret. The custody hearing was on a Thursday morning in early March. Curtis arrived with Ken Hurd, dressed in a suit Audrey O'Connor had helped him pick out. Conservative, respectable, the costume of a good father. Catherine and Laurel sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with Rodolfo Downs. Catherine in a designer dress that probably cost more than Curtis's monthly rent. Laurel looking thin and haunted. Judge Myrna Peterson presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s known for siding with children's welfare over parental rights. Curtis had researched her, found cases where she'd terminated parental rights for far less than what Laurel had done. The hearing began with Ken presenting the video evidence, Audrey's security footage, the timeline, the police reports. Curtis watched the judge's face as Ethan appeared on screen, half naked in the cold, banging on the door while Catherine watched. Judge Peterson's expression hardened. Rodolfo Downs tried to spin it. Momentary lapse in judgment, family stress. Laurel was under her mother's undue influence and deeply regretted her actions. He painted Laurel as a victim of Catherine's manipulation, argued that separating Ethan from his mother would cause more harm than good. Ms. Cohen has enrolled in parenting classes, Downs said. She's undergone psychological evaluation and has been cleared by Dr. Abraham Mullins as fit for supervised visitation. She loves her son and made a terrible mistake, but she deserves a chance to make amends. Ken Hurd stood. Your Honor, the defendant didn't just make a mistake. She actively participated in child torture. The video shows her stripping her 6-year-old son down to his underwear, watching as her mother dragged him outside, and then doing nothing for 18 minutes while he froze. The paramedics testified that another 10 minutes, and this child could have died. This wasn't a momentary lapse. It was deliberate, prolonged cruelty. Judge Peterson looked at Laurel. Ms. Cohen, do you have anything to say? Laurel stood, her voice shaking. Your Honor, I was scared of my mother. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. She controlled everything. My money, my house, my life. When she told me to put Ethan outside, I thought she'd let him back in after a minute. I didn't know she'd lock the door. I tried to argue, but The video shows you pacing. Judge Peterson interrupted. You had a phone. You could have called for help. You could have opened the door yourself. Why didn't you? Laurel's face crumpled. I don't know. I was scared. I was stupid. I'm so sorry. Catherine stood then, imperious and cold. Your Honor, I take full responsibility for what happened. I was the one who made the decision. My daughter was simply following my guidance, as she always has. I believed the child needed discipline, and I miscalculated the severity of the weather. It was wrong, and I accept the consequences. Curtis felt rage course through him. Catherine was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to protect Laurel by taking sole blame. Judge Peterson looked unimpressed. Mrs. Kane, you're not a party to this custody hearing. Your acceptance of responsibility is noted, but this court is concerned with whether Ms. Cohen is fit to parent her child. She is, Catherine insisted. With proper supervision, With my guidance removed from the equation, Laurel is a loving mother. Your guidance nearly killed a child, the judge snapped. Sit down, Mrs. Kane. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Curtis testified about Ethan's condition, about the hospital stay, about the nightmares his son now had. He testified about 8 years of Catherine's control, about Laurel's inability to stand up to her mother, about his fears for Ethan's safety. Audrey O'Connor testified as well, describing what she saw, the horror of watching a child freeze. Detective Cooley testified about the investigation, about Catherine's complete lack of remorse when first questioned. Dr. Mueller, the paramedic, testified about hypothermia, about how close Ethan had come to permanent injury or death. By the end, Curtis saw the judge's decision in her eyes before she even spoke. I've presided over many difficult cases, Judge Peterson said, but I have rarely seen such clear evidence of parental unfitness. Ms. Cohen, you endangered your child's life through inaction and poor judgment. Whether you were under your mother's influence or not, you had a duty to protect your son, and you failed catastrophically. Laurel was crying. Catherine sat stone-faced. I am granting Mr. Cohen full physical and legal custody of the minor child, Ethan Cohen. Ms. Cohen, you will be allowed supervised visitation only, pending completion of court-ordered therapy and parenting classes. These visits will be supervised by a court-appointed monitor, not by any family member. If you show genuine progress, we can revisit the arrangement in 6 months. Kenhard squeezed Curtis's shoulder. They'd won. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am recommending that the district attorney's office pursue criminal charges against both Ms. Cohen and Mrs. Kane to the fullest extent of the law. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of child endangerment, and both women should face criminal consequences. Catherine stood. Your Honor, I must object. You have no standing to object, Mrs. Kane. This hearing is concluded. Curtis walked out of the courtroom with his son's custody secured and his ex-wife in tears. It should have felt like victory. It did, partially. But Curtis knew this was just the opening move. The real game was about to begin. That night, Phase 1 of Hector's plan launched. Curtis was home with Ethan, reading him a bedtime story, when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's done. Curtis waited until Ethan was asleep, then checked the news. Breaking. Federal investigation launched into Kane Foundation for Children's Welfare. The article detailed an anonymous tip to the IRS about financial irregularities at Catherine Kane's flagship charity. Documents had been leaked showing shell company payments, missing funds, falsified expense reports. The IRS had issued a statement. We are investigating allegations of fraud and embezzlement. This is an ongoing investigation, and we cannot comment further at this time. Curtis smiled. Lance Conrad had prepared the documents. Hector's people had leaked them to the right journalists, the right investigators, with enough evidence to trigger a formal inquiry. Catherine Kane's perfect reputation was beginning to crack. The next morning, Catherine's face was on the news. Reporters camped outside her house, shouting questions about fraud and missing charity funds. The other board members of her foundations were distancing themselves, claiming they had no knowledge of financial impropriety. Curtis's phone rang. Laurel. He almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Curtis, please, you have to help us. Help you. The IRS is freezing Mother's accounts. They're investigating all 3 foundations. The lawyers say she could be charged with federal crimes. And the media, they're destroying her reputation. Everything she built, it's collapsing. Good, Curtis said flatly. Curtis, please. I know what we did was wrong, but this is too much. She's going to lose everything. She deserves to lose everything. She tortured our son. She's been stealing from charities meant to help children. She's a monster, Laurel. She's my mother. She's the reason you nearly killed Ethan. Silence. Then, quietly, I know I can't make this right. But Curtis, please, I'm begging you. If there's any mercy left in you, any memory of what we used to be, help us. Curtis thought about mercy. He thought about Catherine's laugh, about Ethan's frozen hands, about 8 years of being treated like dirt. No, he said. You made your choice when you stood there and watched. Now live with it. He hung up. Over the next week, the investigation intensified. The IRS found more irregularities. Catherine had been paying herself through dead people's shell companies for years. The total embezzlement was estimated at over $3 million. State prosecutors announced they were filing criminal charges. Catherine's lawyers, the best money could buy, couldn't stop it. The evidence was too clear, too damning. And Curtis watched it all unfold, knowing this was only the beginning. Hector called. Ready for phase 2? What's phase 2? Making them feel what your boy felt. Fear. Helplessness. Cold. Curtis remembered his promise to Ethan. Grandma is never coming near you again. He thought about justice, about proportionality, about the line between revenge and righteous fury. Tell me the plan, Curtis said. Hector did. It was cruel. It was illegal. It was perfect. Do it, Curtis said. Catherine Kane had lived in her mansion in Ridgewood for 15 years. It was her sanctuary, her fortress, the symbol of her wealth and power. On a Tuesday night in late March, that changed. Curtis had an alibi. He was at a school play with Ethan, dozens of witnesses, time-stamped photos. He was nowhere near Ridgewood when it happened. Hector's team was professional. They waited until Catherine and Laurel were both home, until the lights went out, until the house was dark and quiet. Then they cut the power. Catherine woke to darkness and silence. No heat, no lights, no phone service. They jammed the cell signals in the area. She tried to leave. The doors were sealed from the outside, reinforced somehow. The windows wouldn't open. Hector had planned it perfectly. The temperature in the house would drop slowly, degree by degree, until it matched the temperature Ethan had experienced. -12 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, Hector's team had fail-safes. Hidden cameras to monitor Catherine and Laurel, medical sensors to ensure they didn't actually die. The plan was to let them suffer for exactly 18 minutes at the coldest temperature, then restore heat and release them. 18 minutes. Just like Ethan. Curtis watched the live stream from his phone, Ethan asleep upstairs, unaware. Catherine and Laurel huddled together in the dark, wrapped in blankets, growing colder. Catherine tried to call for help. No signal. She tried to break a window. Reinforced glass wouldn't shatter. She began to understand. The temperature dropped. 50 degrees Fahrenheit. 40 degrees Fahrenheit. 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Laurel was crying, begging her mother to do something. Catherine, for the first time Curtis had ever seen, looked scared. 20 degrees Fahrenheit. 10 degrees Fahrenheit. 0 degrees Fahrenheit. They were shaking now, teeth chattering, skin turning pale. -12 degrees Fahrenheit. Hector's voice came through Curtis's phone. Temperature reached. Starting 18-minute timer. Curtis watched Catherine Kane experience powerlessness. He watched her claw at the doors, scream for help that wouldn't come, wrap herself around her daughter, trying to conserve warmth. He watched her break. At minute 15, Catherine was sobbing, begging God for mercy. At minute 18, the heat kicked back on. The doors unlocked. The cell signal returned. Hector's team was gone before Catherine could even stand. Police arrived an hour later, responding to Catherine's frantic 911 call about a home invasion and kidnapping and attempted murder. But there was no evidence. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, no DNA. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the exact time frame. The power outage was attributed to a grid failure affecting the whole neighborhood. Except somehow only Catherine's house had experienced the extreme temperature drop. The police investigated, but found nothing. Curtis received a text from Hector. They know what it feels like now. Phase 2 complete. Curtis felt something settle in his chest. Not satisfaction, not quite, but a sense of balance restored. Catherine called him the next day, her voice raw. That was you. I don't know what you're talking about. You did that to us. You and whoever you hired. We could have died. Funny, Curtis said. Ethan almost died too. You watched it happen and laughed. This is different. We're, what? More important? More deserving of life? You're not. You're just people who thought they were above consequences. Curtis paused. How did it feel, Catherine? Being that cold? Being that scared? Silence. Now you know, Curtis said. Now you understand what you did to my son. He hung up. The criminal trial began in April. Catherine was facing 15 federal charges: fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Laurel had taken a plea deal, agreed to testify against her mother in exchange for reduced charges. Curtis attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery, watching Catherine's empire crumble. The prosecution was thorough. They presented evidence of shell companies, falsified documents, stolen funds. They called witnesses, former board members who testified about Catherine's financial control, donors who'd been lied to, children's charities that never received the money Catherine claimed to have distributed. Lance Conrad's research had been invaluable. Every piece of dirt, every secret, it all came out. The defense tried to paint Catherine as a confused, elderly woman who'd made accounting errors, who'd trusted the wrong advisors. But the jury saw through it. On the 15th day of trial, Catherine Kane was found guilty on all counts. Curtis was there when the verdict was read. He watched Catherine's face go white, watched her collapse into her chair. Sentencing was set for 2 months later. In the meantime, Catherine lost everything. Her assets were frozen, her house seized, her foundations dissolved. The board she'd sat on for decades asked for her resignation. The society friends who'd once courted her favor now crossed the street to avoid her. Laurel, as part of her plea deal, had to testify about her mother's crimes. She admitted to knowing about the fraud, to helping cover it up, to being complicit in Catherine's schemes. Mother and daughter turned on each other completely. Curtis received supervised visitation reports about Laurel's time with Ethan. The court monitor noted that Laurel seemed disconnected and depressed, that she cried during visits, that Ethan was uncomfortable around her. After 6 weeks, Laurel stopped requesting visitation altogether. She called Curtis one last time. "I'm leaving," she said. "I can't do this anymore. The trial, the media, what you did to us in the house, I can't. I'm taking my plea deal, serving my 6 months, and then I'm gone. I'm leaving New York, maybe leaving the country. I don't want custody of Ethan. I don't want anything. What about your son? He's better off without me. We both know that." Her voice broke. "You win, Curtis. You destroyed us. I hope it was worth it." "It was," Curtis said, and meant it. Laurel hung up. Curtis never heard from her again. Catherine's sentencing arrived in June. Curtis brought Ethan to school, then drove to the courthouse alone. The courtroom was packed. Media, prosecutors, people from the charities Catherine had stolen from. Judge Arturo Acevedo presided, a stern man known for harsh sentences in fraud cases. Catherine stood for sentencing, looking 20 years older than she had 4 months ago. Prison awaiting trial had not been kind to her. "Mrs. Kane," Judge Acevedo said, "you were entrusted with the care of vulnerable children through your charitable work. Instead of helping them, you stole from them. You defrauded donors, embezzled millions, and lived a life of luxury built on lies. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no mercy." Catherine's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. Catherine was 63, had no prior record, was unlikely to reoffend. The judge was unmoved. "I am sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison, with restitution of $3.2 million to the defrauded charities. You will serve a minimum of 10 years before being eligible for parole." Catherine collapsed. Her lawyer caught her, but she was wailing, screaming about how this was unfair, how she'd been set up. Curtis watched her being led away in handcuffs, still protesting, still refusing to accept responsibility. He felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to interview him. Curtis declined. He had nothing to say to them. He drove back to Brooklyn, to the new apartment he'd rented, small but comfortable, in a good school district, far from the memories of Ridgewood. Ethan was there with his babysitter, Jasmine Pearson, a kind woman in her 20s who Ethan adored. "How'd it go?" Jasmine asked. "It's over," Curtis said. "It's finally over." But it wasn't. Not quite. That night, Curtis received one final text from Hector. "Saw the news. Good outcome. But there's one more thing we need to talk about." Curtis called him. "What thing?" "Glenn Quinn." Curtis froze. "What about him?" "I had some people look into his disappearance, like you asked. We found something." Catherine didn't just let him drown. She drugged him first, sleeping pills in his drink, then pushed him overboard. "We found a witness, guy who worked at the marina where they launched from. He saw Catherine arguing with Quinn right before they went out, saw her putting something in a thermos she brought on the boat. Can he testify? 33 years later? Maybe. But here's the thing, the body was never found. Without remains, without physical evidence, it's just an old man's word against a convicted felon. Prosecutors might not even take the case." Curtis thought about it. Catherine was already in prison for 12 years. She was 63. She might die there. Was pursuing a decades-old murder charge worth it? "What do you think?" Curtis asked. "I think," Hector said slowly, "that sometimes the system does enough. She's locked up, her life is over, her reputation destroyed. Maybe that's justice enough." Curtis considered. Part of him wanted to see Catherine charged with murder, wanted to see her face when she realized even prison wasn't her final punishment. But another part, the part that had to think about Ethan, about building a new life, about moving forward, wanted to be done with the Canes forever. Let it go, Curtis decided. She's in prison. That's enough. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. All right. Then we're square. You need anything else, you know how to reach me. But Curtis, you did good. You got justice for your boy. Most people never get that. Thanks, Hector. For everything. They hung up. Curtis sat in his apartment, Ethan sleeping peacefully in the next room, and felt the weight of 4 months lift from his shoulders. He'd destroyed the people who hurt his son. He'd done it thoroughly, ruthlessly, effectively. And now it was time to rebuild. 6 months later, Curtis's life looked completely different. The divorce was finalized. Laurel had signed away all parental rights from prison, where she was serving her sentence for aiding Catherine's fraud. She'd be out in 3 months, but had made it clear she wanted no contact with Curtis or Ethan. Curtis had full custody, full control of his life for the first time in 8 years. His photography business was thriving. Turned out that being featured in news stories as the father who fought back had given him unexpected publicity. People wanted to hire him, wanted to support him. He'd started taking artistic commissions again, was even being courted by a gallery in Chelsea. Ethan was doing better too. The nightmares had faded. He'd started therapy, play therapy with a trauma specialist named Dr. Elaine Howard, and was making real progress. He still asked about his mother sometimes, but less and less. When he did, Curtis was honest. Your mom made bad choices. She's trying to get better, but she needs to do that away from us. Ethan seemed to accept that. Curtis had also started dating. Nothing serious yet, but he'd met a woman named Joanna Marsh at one of Ethan's soccer games. Her daughter played on the same team. They'd gone for coffee a few times, talked about single parenting, about starting over. It felt good. Like life was moving forward instead of staying trapped in the past. One Saturday in November, Curtis got a phone call from an unknown number. Mr. Cohen? This is Detective Cooley. Curtis felt his stomach tighten. Detective, what can I do for you? I wanted to update you on the Catherine Kane case. She's appealing her sentence, claiming prosecutorial misconduct. Her lawyers found some irregularities in how the investigation started. Specifically, they're questioning where the initial evidence came from. Curtis's blood went cold. Lance Conrad. The leaked documents. What kind of irregularities? The anonymous tip that started everything. The documents that were provided to the IRS. Catherine's lawyers are claiming they were obtained illegally, that someone broke into her home or her office and stole confidential information, then leaked it to frame her. Were they? I don't know, Mr. Cohen. Were they? Curtis thought about lying, then realized Cooley already knew the answer. I hired a private investigator to look into Catherine's background. He found evidence of fraud and reported it to the appropriate authorities. That's all I know. Did this investigator obtain the evidence legally? You'd have to ask him. Cooley sighed. Mr. Cohen, I'm going to be straight with you. I think Catherine Kane is exactly where she deserves to be. I think she's a monster who got what was coming to her. But if evidence was obtained illegally, her conviction could be overturned. Curtis felt panic rise. What are you saying? I'm saying that if anyone involved in this case did anything illegal, now's the time to make sure it can't be proven. Destroy documents, eliminate witnesses, cover tracks. Because Catherine's lawyers are vicious, and they will find anything that can exonerate her. Curtis understood. Cooley was giving him a warning, maybe even a chance to clean house. Thank you for the heads up, Detective. Yeah. Look, off the record. That thing with the power outage at Catherine's house in March? The one where she claimed someone trapped her inside and dropped the temperature? I never believed her story. No evidence, no witnesses, nothing. But if something like that did happen, and if it ever came to light, it could be used to paint you as a vigilante. Could hurt your custody case. Could even get you arrested. Curtis said nothing. So if someone did do something like that, Cooley continued, they should make damn sure no one can ever prove it. No recordings, no witnesses, no evidence. Understand. I understand. Good. Take care of yourself, Mr. Cohen. And that boy of yours. Cooley hung up. Curtis immediately called Hector. We need to meet. Now. They met at the same spot in Prospect Park, two men in the dark talking about crimes. Catherine's appealing, Curtis said. They're investigating how the evidence against her was obtained. If they find out about Lance, about the documents, They won't, Hector interrupted. Lance is a pro. He covered his tracks. The documents were leaked through so many intermediaries that even if they traced them back, they'd hit dead ends. What about the power outage? The thing at her house? No evidence. No cameras. No witnesses. No way to prove anything. It's her word against nothing. She can scream all she wants, but without proof, she's just a crazy woman making accusations. Curtis felt his breathing slow. You're sure? I'm sure. But Curtis, this is a reminder. What we did, it was risky. We got away with it because we were careful. But you need to be done now. No more revenge. No more schemes. Catherine's in prison. Laurel's out of your life. You got your son. Walk away while you're ahead. Curtis knew Hector was right. He'd pushed his luck far enough. I'm done, Curtis said. No more. Good. Hector clapped his shoulder. You're a good man who did bad things for the right reasons. Don't let it consume you. They parted ways, and Curtis went home to his son. The appeal process dragged on for months. Catherine's lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to get evidence thrown out, trying to discredit witnesses. They failed. In March, 1 year after Curtis had watched his son nearly die, the appeals court upheld Catherine's conviction. The evidence was ruled admissible, the investigation sound. Catherine Kane would serve her 12 years. Curtis got the news while picking Ethan up from school. He sat in his car and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It was over. Really, truly over. That night, he took Ethan out for pizza. They sat in a booth at their favorite place, Ethan chattering about his day, about the science project he was working on, about the new friend he'd made. Curtis watched his son smile and realized this was victory. Not the courtroom drama, not the revenge, not Catherine's imprisonment. This, his son, happy and safe and loved. Dad, Ethan looked at him curiously. You okay? Curtis smiled. Yeah, buddy. I'm great. You look weird. Like you're gonna cry. Happy tears, Curtis said. Just thinking about how lucky I am to have you. Ethan rolled his eyes the way only a 7-year-old could. You're being mushy. I'm allowed. I'm your dad. They finished their pizza, went home, and Curtis read Ethan 3 chapters of his current favorite book before bed. As he was leaving the room, Ethan called out, Dad? I'm glad it's just us. You and me. Curtis turned back. Me too, kiddo. Me too. He closed the door and stood in the hallway, feeling the weight of the past years settle into memory. He'd done terrible things. Illegal things. Things that could have destroyed him if they'd been discovered. But he'd do them all again to protect his son. Curtis Cohen had learned that compromise had limits. That some people deserve destruction, not mercy. That the system wasn't always enough, and sometimes you had to take justice into your own hands. He'd learned that he was capable of cruelty when cruelty was called for. And he'd learned that he could live with that. Curtis walked to his bedroom, looked out the window at the Brooklyn skyline, and thought about the future. No more looking back. No more dwelling on Catherine and Laurel and what they'd done. Forward. Only forward. He had a son to raise, a business to grow, a life to build. And for the first time in 8 years, that life was entirely his own. Curtis smiled, turned off the light, and went to bed. The monster in his life was caged. The war was won. And Curtis Cohen, father, photographer, survivor, could finally rest. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.